All right, guys. Hey, listen up. I apologize. It's been a crazy day. We had a live Q&A scheduled this morning, and had some things come up. Wasn't able to get to it. So we're going to jump into it here. Probably about 2 minutes. I'm also running a few minutes late here at 8 o'clock. So we have to get the link posted up for our Patreon followers, and then we will get started. So if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat, and let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see if I can get to them. I've got a list of questions here from Patreon, so I'm going to be hitting those first off. But all right, everyone. Hey, thanks for jumping on. I apologize for running a few minutes late here. We had one scheduled this morning. I had something come up at the last minute. I really appreciate everybody being patient, and I'm glad to see some of you guys are been hanging out, waiting. So I'm going to give it another 2 minutes. My social media manager is actually posting this on Patreon right now, so it may take a minute or two to kind of get some of the other people on board. In the meantime, write a question in the comment box if you'd like. If you I have a couple questions here I need to answer from Patreon, and then we're going to kind of dig right in. See how many of you guys' questions I can get to as well. So a lot of the questions I've been getting lately are on my bug out video. If you're unaware, I did a long form. It's close to an hour. It's a bug out video on EMP hardened bug out vehicles. So if you haven't seen that, check that out as well. Let me just go ahead and wait 1 or 2 more minutes here, guys. Okay, one of the questions right off the bat here, just a side question. They're asking me about wilderness survival schools. Now there are a lot of wilderness survival schools that are out there, and I'm not going to say they're all the same, but I mean, it's kind of hard to screw up wilderness survival skills. It's kind of a set of skills that have been around for what, a couple thousand years. So as far as like personal preference, I mean, I might have 1 or 2 kind of preferences, like ex-SEER guys that I was in the military with. I might point you toward those guys, but other than that, I mean, any wilderness survival school, I'm sure there's good, better ones than not, but just do a little research. But I don't have any personal recommendations for that. Sorry. Yeah, so this was a kind of a question about me putting on wilderness survival training, and to be honest with you, I don't have the time. I've just been very busy with lots of other things right now. I'm trying to balance. That's kind of been the thing I fought with for a long time, is that I kind of take on too many projects. I tackle too many things at one time, and I'm trying to be more focused on, putting out more content. If you follow me on Patreon, I just was out in Montana doing some backpacking, and I posted a video on that. I actually posted a video of a couple mistakes I made, things not to do when you go backpacking and do an overnight trip. So, trying to do more content, but at the same time, it's if you follow the news, it's kind of a crazy time to be alive, right? I mean, there's a lot of things happening. There's a lot of things happening with China and Russia. There's a lot of things happening with quantum computing lately in the last couple of weeks. Solar, we're getting close to our solar maximum, and it just seems like, man, my clients are they're chomping at the bit to get things done at the last minute, and I actually kind of stop. I can only take so many clients, right? So it's just been crazy busy. All right, so I'm going to grab a bottle of water here, and then we're going to get started with some of your questions. And I saw that some of you guys are putting some questions in the comments, and I'm going to jump into that as well. All right, so I am not looking very professional today. Wearing a t-shirt. I just got back from the pool with the wife and kids. So bear with my attire. All right, here we go. All right, how do you feel about 1980s through 1990 and early 1990s military Chevy trucks and ton and a quarter Blazers with the diesel? So, oh man, I wish I had this website pulled up ahead of time. So I prefer the Cummins over the Chevy diesels and the Ford diesels, but 80s through 90s military Chevy diesel trucks, yeah, as long as it's a purely mechanical engine, I do believe there is. Oh man, there's one sensor on Chevy trucks that was on there earlier than the Cummins. And if somebody wants to chime in the comments, feel free to. Trying to see if I can pull up my chat box here. Okay, do I think most modern handheld flashlights or headlamps will work after an EMP or CME? So again, this is the $1 million question. So I talk a lot about like EMP testing. If you don't know, for the last 4 or 5 years, I've been kind of running the same circles with the EMP Commission guys. I attend a lot of the same events. I'm the the Deputy Director of the U.S. Task Force on National and Homeland Security. And so I attend the FBI's InfraGard meetings. I go to Security Grid Coalition meetings. I was part of the Electromagnetic Defense Task Force. So I'm regularly have access to kind of the top engineers from the military test facilities and some of the commercial test facilities. And this is stuff we've been talking about. It's very expensive to rent a day at an EMP generation facility, like especially a military grade one. You're talking $25,000-$30,000 a day. So when most of the tests they're doing is for the government and the military. And if they have tested LED light bulbs and LED flashlights, we just don't know. And so, who's got that kind of money to test that? I have talked with some of I'm not going to say the name of the facility. It's something I've been talking about actually for the last 6 months. But, I had a good conversation with one of these guys. And I said, hey, just for the average Joe out there, there's a lot of stuff on the internet on how to build a Faraday cage at home. This technique, there's a trash can technique, but none of that stuff's ever been through an EMP generator. So, hey, if, just to help the little guy out, can you just start throwing some of these things in there? For instance, a couple of flashlights and some LED light bulbs. Can you just throw some of these things in there? Somebody else's test, don't tell, I don't know. And he was like, yeah, we could probably figure some stuff out. And so that's something I'm working on. Again, it's on my list of things to do. I have found a test lab that would start doing this. We've built a couple Faraday boxes per their recommendations that I just need to get mailed out to them. It's going to take a pallet to get them there. And they offer to test them for free just because I've, gotten to know these guys and stuff. But again, it just hasn't happened yet. So let's see here. I want to get the chat box up here because I do have a couple other questions from Patreon, but I've been seeing a bunch of you guys that were good enough to be kind of hanging out and waiting. Let me mute this. Make sure there's no waiting. Double feed. Okay. So let me look at some of you guys' questions that were on here waiting. I know on your bug out vehicle engine of choice, the 4BT Cummins is also a great choice and widely available. So absolutely. So in my bug out vehicle, EMP proof bug out vehicle video that I just did, it's an hour long. Go out and check that out if you haven't watched it. But my top recommendation is the 6BT 5.9 Cummins first second gen Cummins engine. For reliability, it's a one engine wire, right? And so a commenter just mentioned the 4BT. I didn't mention it in there, but absolutely 4BT is just as solid as a 6BT. You're just not going to get the horsepower and torque numbers. And typically, if you need to tow something, if you're carrying a lot of weight, the 4BT is extremely long-term reliable. They actually put those in Toyota Tacomas a lot. So it's a lighter truck, lighter vehicle that can handle that smaller engine with 2 less cylinders. So yeah, 4BT. That's a great comment there, Mr. Pearson. I realize my safe is completely digital. Okay, I get this question a lot. I realize my safe is completely digital with a keypad and no physical key. In an EMP event, do you think it will be faulty? It has most of my weapons in it. First off, I would just double check. A lot of times people don't realize if you pop that that panel off, that keypad, a lot of times there's a key access underneath the keypad. But there are some safes that are strictly keypad only. Will it survive an EMP? Again, with an EMP question, where are you? What part of the country? Were you directly under where the super EMP went off? Are you at the opposite end of the coast from where it went off? Is this in a metal building? Is it on the first floor? Is it in your basement? There's 100 different variables, but I would not, if I had my guns in a safe with a keypad, I wouldn't be able to sleep at night knowing that I may not have access to my weapons in the aftermath of an EMP situation. So I would definitely try and rectify that if I were you. Actually, and I've had a couple clients that had that. I think it may be possible. It may be possible if you contact the manufacturer. I think one of the manufacturers will send you a keyed. You can remove the keypad and put a keyed lock in there. But again, that's not super secure. So, all right. Do you think most modern okay, we just answered that. Are there different levels of quality for Faraday bags? Can you speak the best solutions? Okay, so EMP Faraday bags, it's quite the rage. They're all over the internet. They're all over YouTube. Most people get sponsored by some of these companies. It's very important. It's very important that you go and you look on their data, because some of them are just selling ESD bags, which are electric static. I forget the D stands for, sorry, but they're basically anti-static bags. There's a performance difference between anti-static bags that you would get, a motherboard shipped to you in the mail from, and discharge. Thank you, anti-static discharge. Thank you, whoever, Steve. There's a difference between that and an actual the type of material that's used in like EMP Faraday bags. So make sure there's test data. There are 3 or 4 companies that have had mill standard testing done on their bags, and they have the data on their website. What you're looking at is you're probably getting anywhere between 35 and 40 decibels of protection from an EMP with a Faraday bag, okay? And the EMP Commission recommends to protect up to 85. So they're just too thin. Like, again, I would not have a plastic laptop in an ESD bag sitting on my desk. I just wouldn't do it. So you can do what's called nesting. So you could layer them, put it in one bag, wrap it in something where you're not conducting between the two, whether it be bubble wrap or something. Put it in another ESD bag, and you'll be getting closer. It doesn't equal. It's not like 40 plus 40. That's not how it works, but it does definitely help. So if you don't have the ability to pay for a fully functioning Faraday box, which are quite expensive, I think the last one one of my clients bought was like the size of like a medium-sized chest freezer from Holland Shielding, and it was over $10,000, not counting shipping. So to truly 100% trust your life, protect from a super EMP if you're near ground zero, it really kind of takes a lot. And again, if you're new to the channel, 188-125, which is the military standards for EMP protection. Those are unclassified protection standards, which everyone quotes and everybody protects to. The only small problem to that is they're 50 years old or 45 years old at this point. And we have new information, so that's why they're unclassified. That's why you can access them. There's actually another set of military hardening standards, which is a lot more difficult to achieve. But those are, top secret. Nobody I know has access to them. It's kind of a need to know basis, right? So, are there different levels of quality for Faraday bags? Okay, yeah, just answered that. Let me scroll down here real quick. Thought somebody else wrote something, but maybe not. All right, so let me go back to the Patreon questions here. What was the next question? All right. Okay, what is the maximum drive time you should be from your bug out location? Or should you buy a bug out location and just live there? For those of us who can only afford one house, and since it appears we are close to the SHTF happening, Are there any downsides to being out in the middle of nowhere with an LLC and trust owning the property? Okay, so there's 5 questions there. I have, over the course of the last couple of years, answered those in different Patreon videos. If you don't follow me on Patreon, be sure to check that out. But I'll try and condense them all and be as brief as possible. Any downsides to being out in the middle of nowhere with an LLC and trust owning the property? No. If you're going to buy a survival retreat property, that's going to be your secondary location or even your primary location, absolutely buy it with an LLC and a trust, and hide the fact that you own that property. Do not buy it in your own name. That's my recommendation. Anybody that... Here's the problem. Everybody, you're supposed to treat prepping like Fight Club. You're not supposed to talk about it. You're not supposed to... But it just doesn't happen. I see it with so many people. They're all talking about what they're doing and showing off their location, their survival retreat, and they talk about the water cooler at work. You know, it's just too cool of a topic not to have friends to talk about it with, right? So, I mean, that's the first step. Don't talk about it. But somebody can look you up online and find out where your location is. So yeah, always buy it in trust. Should you buy a bug out location and just live there? Let me answer the other one first. What's the maximum drive time you should be from bug out location? So typically, I'm going to say the maximum drive time you should be from your location is like 3 hours, 3.5 hours. And the reason I say that is because I see so many times people buy a property that's 5, 6, 7, 8 hours away, and you know, the first year they're excited, it's a new location, and they're doing a bunch of construction, and they're up there every weekend. And then after a year or two, I mean, that 4 or 5 hour drive on the weekends just gets real fast. And then over time, they stop making the trip. So practicality wise, I really strongly feel that 3 hours is a trip that you can make after work on Friday and drive back Sunday night and still get some good relaxation time. Because when you get up there, you're probably gonna have to mow the grass. You're probably gonna have to fix something or do something. You probably have a couple projects up there you need to jump into, but it's gonna give you time to recharge, and it's not just every weekend's a work weekend when you go up to your survival retreat. Because you know, unless you have more money than you know what to do with, and you can just have a location for that purpose, that's one thing. But most of the time, people buy this to enjoy, to hunt, and to spend time there with family and children, teach them to hunt and fish. And you know, so 3 hours is kind of my max. On the East Coast here, I mean, if you drive 3 hours out of any town, you've probably driven through 2 other towns. You're probably driving into another city at some point. So that 3 hour mark is not hard to do on the East Coast. You kind of have to, because like I said, typically an hour and a half, 2 hours out of a major city, and you can find a location. But if you're driving 3 hours out of a major city, you're running into another big city. That's just the way it is. So hour and a half, 2 hours would probably be better. So with that said, on the West Coast, I actually have a couple clients right now. We're dealing with this. The West Coast, it's different. West Coast property is extremely hard to find. It's extremely expensive to find. Trying to find tucked away locations, there's just not a lot of stuff on the market. It's really difficult to find a property. So I mean, I have clients right now that are looking at a 3.5, 4 hour drive, because that's all there is on the market. That's all there's been on the market for, you know, 6 months they've been looking. So I mean, I get that. It's just you have to go into the realization. And I will say a 3.5 hour drive in you know, New Mexico is a lot easier drive than 3.5 hours on the East Coast, winding up and down around bends and over hills and through the woods, and to grandmother's house we go. So 4 hours on a straight road in New Mexico is probably a bit easier hike. But anyways, that's kind of the point. And should you buy a bug out location and just live there? The problem that I have there is that we're social creatures. We have friends, and we have church families, and we have like even where I live, I don't live at my survival retreat, and living at your survival retreat is kind of a isolation life, because you're going to have friends and families and cousins are eventually going to stop by, and you're going to have a church picnic at some point. I mean, unless you totally plan to live the loner lifestyle, you know, homesteading. I mean, both my tractors broke down this week, both of them. My tractor and my lawnmower. So now I have to borrow my neighbor's lawnmower to get my grass mowed before I can get them fixed. So it's, you're gonna get to know people, and there's gonna be people that are be coming to this location. And then if you're homesteading and you have large garden and animals, when those people were starving, even your FedEx driver. I mean, my FedEx, I order a lot of stuff on Amazon because I live pretty remotely, and the FedEx driver, I see him every 3 or 4 days. Like, at some point when these people are starving to death, they're gonna be racking their brain. Who has food? Who has food? What I mean? All that guy that lived up there on that top of that mountain, he's got a big garden and animals and stuff like that. So these are all things you have to be conscious about if you're living at your survival retreat. All the stuff that you really want to do and all the skills you want to practice, you're kind of practicing it in front of the world. You're practicing it in front of all your peers. So I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm just saying there's more risks that come along with it, if that makes sense. I'll jump back over to, I think I saw another question or two come in here. Let me see on YouTube here. Yeah, okay. Russia has been targeting the electrical infrastructure in Ukraine and hasn't even tried to EMP them. I'm just wondering if an EMP weapon is feasible. It's 100% feasible. Okay. What you have to understand is Russia doesn't want World War III. They don't want World War III. They walked into Ukraine and they kind of underestimated the fact that Ukraine was going to be getting a whole bunch of technological weapons from the West. And we had our U.S. cyber warfare teams in there a couple months before the war kicked off. Russia doesn't want a war. And we have to be careful because we're kind of pushing them into one with some of our stuff. So I don't want to get political and what's going on with the war right now, but it's getting more and more dangerous as time progresses. I mean, they have straight up said, so as far as them EMPing Ukraine, I don't think so, because they have a lot of their own citizens that live in that area. An EMP goes really far. Yes, they could set it off at lower altitude. It would be more powerful, but they're not trying to break Ukraine. They're trying to take it over. This is kind of a debate I've had with the United States. People are like, a lot, even the people in the organizations I run with, they really strongly feel that the China, Russia, after World War III, if they hit us, take us out with an EMP, they're going to come in with troops and take the country over. It's like you're taking over a toy that you've just destroyed. It's completely broken. It's just full of starving, death, bodies in the street, the polluted rivers from all the factories. I mean, it's one thing. I understand if the enemy nation stuff come over here and start stealing. They clean out Fort Knox. That makes sense to me. They steal important stuff from the country, like they land, they take stuff and they take off. But like an occupying force in the massive landmass called America, with 80% of the country dead bodies floating in the rivers and on the streets, like nobody's going to want that. So the same thing with Ukraine. Like, they're not trying to break it, they want to own it, right? They want control of it. So I strongly do not believe they'll use an EMP. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility at all that they start using tactical nukes. So I'll tell you right now, if Ukraine keeps attacking inside Russia, that's a very real threat, especially if they start using weapons they're getting from the West. That's a whole different ballgame, because we've told them you can only use these for self-defense. Here's some really big guns, just use it for self-defense. But who knows? Anyways, all right, I'm going to stop talking about Russia and Ukraine right now. I have way too much food and I need to sell some. Mix of rainy day and mountain house and miscellaneous. Go to my website, DM me. Yeah, absolutely. I've got people that'll buy your food. DM me through the contact me section. But at the end of the day, I'm going to sit here and tell you, I guarantee you ain't got too much food. Because here's the problem I have with almost every one of my clients. Every one of my clients, they have a bunch of food for their particular family. They'll buy like a 1-year food plan, especially if it's like Mountain House or something like that, or Wise or one of these companies. They'll buy a 1-year food plan, not realizing they've only got 4 months worth of actual food, or 4 months of actual calories, because these meal plans that they sell you, the 6-month, the 3-month, it's stupid. It's embarrassing how many total calories. On average, this was a few years ago. I haven't checked lately. Maybe they've changed, but I doubt they have. Like 4 years ago, when was Survival Theory? 8 years ago, when I did the research, and I was researching every one of these food packages, on average, they had about 800 calories a day. And if you've read my survival theory too, where I get into the psychology, the physiology, and the studies, and the Minnesota starvation experiment and historical stuff, you'll see that the Minnesota starvation experiment, those guys, I mean, they starved them, giving them 1,500 calories a day, right? So a starvation diet for an average man is 1,500 calories, and most of these food plans have like 800. So anyways, you probably have more food, or you probably have less food than you think you do. You have less calories than you think you do. So I'm not sure about selling food, but hey, if you want to sell it, shoot me an email and I'll hook you up, brother. We'll buy some of that food. My concern is that 3 hours is normal conditions. I'd be concerned that that drive time would double. I'm in West Virginia and regularly avoid the interstate because if there's a traffic jam, I'm stuck. Yeah. Right. So, I mean, that's another thing to consider. So that's a good point. So if your normal drive time, so most people that drive to their survival retreat, they're getting on the interstate. I'm getting on the interstate, right? If I'm traveling to my survival retreat, I'm not taking the back roads there, but on paper maps, I have back roads planned to get to my survival retreat. So yeah, getting there on the back roads is probably going to take a good bit longer than getting there on the interstate. So yeah, I mean, that's a good point. And I'm in West Virginia too, brother, and it is windy. When we moved here, my wife was pregnant. She was a couple months pregnant, and our church is only 7 miles away. And I think probably 8 out of 10 times we would drive to church, I had to pull over at some point so she could throw out. They're just very windy roads, very narrow roads. We love it out here, but the roads are quite windy. I bugged out in March of 2020. It was a huge mistake. I don't know. So that was probably, I'm guessing, about COVID. I have multiple clients that bugged out during COVID. In the sense of it was a mistake, yeah, the pandemic was nowhere near as bad as anybody predicted. The stuff, the reports we're getting out of China and India, you know, where the hospitals were filling up and people are dropping dead in the streets. That stuff turned out not to be quite accurate. I mean, we know now it had a 0.03% death rate over the total population. So, but, you know, practice makes perfect, right? Here's the thing. If that pandemic would, you know, let's say something would have, nature would have stepped in to, I don't want to say the name because I don't know if they'll flag me, but the thing that happened back in 2020, that same lab had similar viruses, flu viruses that had a 40% death rate. So if 40% of the people started dying, you know, this thing mutated or people started dying, then you would have been really smart. So that's always been my recommendation. Err on the side of caution. Get out early. Yeah, you may feel stupid after the fact, but man, get out early. West Virginia sucks. That is where I moved to. Maybe where you live, man. I love it. I could not be happier. I could not be happier than West Virginia. Went to the small county fair where we live. There was more mullets than I could count. Demolition Derby. Took my kid to Demolition Derby. He loved the heck out of that, smashing up cars. Heck yeah, I love West Virginia. How quickly do things go sideways after a grid down situation? I believe you mentioned leaving on day 3 if you live in a populated area. Think large suburbs area, 5,000 homes. Okay. Get out early is my point. So a lot of people want to do this thing where they leave like the second the EMP goes off and they freak out. And I know I'm probably in the lower end of the spectrum here of people who make recommendations, but my opinion, the very first day, especially if it does nail a bunch of cars, there's a lot of people that are going to be walking on the. I'm not trying to drive on the road when there's a lot of people trying to get home from their abandoned cars. There's going to be a lot of people on the highways and byways day one. So I would not want to be out there dealing with them. By nighttime, they're going to get somewhere, even if they get off the road and crash behind a house and sleep. You know, I think the early morning, you know, maybe half hour before daybreak, the morning after the event is the best time to leave, depending on your, like if you're talking major cities, New York, Atlanta, yes, morning of day 2, get out, you know, don't wait. But if you're in like a medium-sized town, 50,000, 100,000, yeah, I would say maybe even like 200,000 or 300,000. You could on that second day, if you need to make some moves, if you got some cash on hand, you need to get rid of that cash. Try and do it the very first day of the event. Maybe you need to make a couple trips to your survival retreat. I don't know. But I'd be making moves, and I think you're relatively safe on the road the morning of day 2 after the EMP. Again, starting out the next morning. I wouldn't do that personally, but I think you can, right? And get to your location, get squared away. Thanks. No problem. No problem, man. I'm starting to buy hand tools, but not getting rid of the power tools I have. My power tools are battery operated. That's where an EMP Faraday box comes in to effect. Again, I've discussed this on my Patreon page and given more details, but my discussions with the EMP, the military grade EMP test facilities and the engineers from there, if you want to be 100% guaranteed, again, EMP is it's a moving target because you don't know if you're going to be at ground zero. You're not going to be how far away you are. We just don't know until it happens, right? We know the science behind it. We know the science behind it is real. We just don't. You just can't. Since 1962, you just can't test high altitude EMPs anymore because another thing people don't realize, it knocks out all the low orbit satellites, all your GPS, all your sat phones, all your a lot of your technological satellites just fall from the sky. But anyways, man, where was I going? Oh, power tools. Sorry, Faraday cages. A simple way to do that is to just get a fabricator and have them build a box for your stuff at a 3/16 inch plate steel. Let me say that again. 3/16 inch plate steel, double welded. Okay, and then have it die tested. That's an important part to make sure there's no small air pockets in any of the welds or even in the steel itself, so you don't have any weak spots. So have it die tested, and then you need to get a gasket from a place like Holland Schilling. They have a couple different types. Like 100 decibel gasket that fits that lid perfectly. Essentially, you want a solid steel box around your stuff. 3/16 inch plate steel. So I'll tell you right now, because we built a bunch of these things for different clients, or had them built. I didn't do it, but they're heavy. They're heavy. So I mean, we've used, because there's gaskets at Holland Schilling that we bought for ammo cans, and just so you know, ammo cans are not that thick of a metal, and the seams and everything. It's some protection. We were talking about Faraday bags earlier. It's some protection, but it's not guaranteed. It's not guaranteed. So, I mean, we have clients that have like high-end, $25,000, $30,000 thermal optics and thermal radar devices and thermal drones for patrolling instead of walking patrols. We have some pretty expensive stuff. So to go and have some fabricators build us some basic ammo can style boxes that fit the same size gasket that we had made for the other boxes made sense. But we were still looking at a couple $100 per box. I mean, it's not cheap, but in the scheme of protecting a $25,000 or $30,000 high-tech piece of equipment, that's going to put you up here after the fact, it's worth every penny. So yeah, I mean, you need to get that. I have backup hand tools, hammers, hand saws, crosscut saws. I have the equipment at the retreat for if the power tools fail. For now, we're using a kind of a lower cost protection method for the power tools. Should be good, might not. We're not trusting our life to the fact that the power tools are functioning. We have backups, but we've made basic precautions because, again, I'm not spending $10,000 to protect $600 worth of DeWalt tools. Actually, I probably got a lot more than that in DeWalt tools. Yeah, I'm sure I got a lot more than that in DeWalt tools. But still. All right. Stuck in the suburb of Austin because of work. Unfortunately, just moved here from out of state last year. Having a hard time finding some land off the beaten path. That is not 4 hours away. If you just jumped in here, we just talked about that. Out west, it is tough. If you're looking for 20, 30, 40, 50 acres, an hour drive out of a city, really hard to find. I mean, that's what I do for a living, is look for property for clients and help them build stuff. And it's hard to find. So I'll give you a recommendation. Uh, it's time consuming, and most of my clients, that's one thing, they don't have time. They're business, they're guys that hire other people to do things for them, right? So something I have had luck in is basically going on Google Earth and figuring out where I live, and figuring out like, hey, 2 hour drive from here, between an hour and a half, 2.5, 3 hours outside of the city. Basically do a deconstruction of the area and find some areas that would fit survival retreat location really well. So a lot of times when you're on Zillow, you're on, Ranch and Farm, you're on some of these locations, you only have option of what's available. You only have what's on the market, right? And it may be on, the driveway's off a 2-lane road and the house is right there. It's beautiful. It fits. Everything's perfect. But this one thing, you can see it from the road. Well, sorry, that completely kills it for me. It might be the best property in the world, but if you can be seen from, right there, and I realize this is harder to do on out west, especially in West Texas, some of these areas that are, or East Texas, some of these areas that are really, really, really flat, right? But that's your ultimate goal. So my point is go backwards. Figure out, hey, this looks like a really good location. This looks like you know what I mean? And then go to your courthouse and find out who owns those properties. Try and find some properties. Depending on what state you're in, you might be able to just access this information online. A lot of times that's what I'll do, is just pay a membership and have access, and then put a letter together, right? And just start mailing them out. Find 15, 20 properties that you really like, that fit everything that you want. And then start mailing letters out to the owners and just see if you can buy it. And so probably for every 30 letters I send, on average I get about, actually I probably get 6 or 8 back. Most of y'all knows, but I'll usually get 1 for every 30 that I send. So that, I mean, we're talking 6 or 7 hours, or you can wait 6 or 8 months to wait for a property. The other thing I've seen have success in is, a lot of times, if you just want to buy a small parcel and there's just big parcels, and I like having a small parcel with a bunch of big parcels around me. That's, if you can get that, do it, right? It's hard to find those little nuggets that are tucked away, right? That aren't visible from a road, long driveway, a whole bunch of stuff. Something to consider. So I've actually had a client that's had success with this also, because he was, not lower budget, but he wasn't super high net worth guy, and he didn't have millions of dollars to spend on this. So he sent a bunch of letters out there, took a picture of him and his family and his kids and his RV, and said, hey, we'd like to get away on the weekends, and we'd like to just see if we can, rent a little section down there by your creek and spend some time out there, and just offer to help. You'll mow, you'll maintain it pristinely, and you will, when you get there, take care of it. And then once you get out there and you get to know the landowner, start becoming kind of friends with them. Offer to help them. Hey, can I help you? I just noticed you're belling. Hey, can I help you? Can we grow a garden out here? I'd really like to grow a garden. I'll pay for it. I'll pay for the supplies, and start to get to know this guy. He might end up selling you. And this happened with a guy after like 3 years out there keeping a perfect campsite. And I mean perfect, crystal clear. He offered the guy like double what acreage was worth out there, but he had got to know the guy. So it wasn't like you're cold calling him out of the blue. And the guy agreed to sell him, I think he got 5 acres off him or something. Again, he didn't have a lot of money. That's one way to try and skin that cat. Oh, okay. Well, I've been on here for a while. I appreciate everybody sticking through today, and sorry about being a couple minutes late on the getting logged in here, but we'll do this again here shortly. As always, guys, prepare for the worst, hope for the best, and let God do the rest. See ya.